America Vespucci remains one of the most debated and enigmatic figures of the age of exploration. While not as widely celebrated as Christopher Columbus, his legacy is deeply ingrained in the very name of the American continents. His voyages, writings, and interpretation of his observations by European cartographers played a critical role in shaping the European understanding of the New World. However, his role has also been surrounded by confusion, partly due to the ambiguous nature of his achievements, the stylized nature of his letters, and the way his name became attached to the continents of the Western Hemisphere. To address whether Amerigo Vespucci was truly a sailor, one must look closely at his background and documented voyages. Vespucci was born in Florence in 1454, a city that was more renowned for its contributions to finance and humanism than for maritime exploration. He came from a well-educated background and was trained in navigation and astronomy. Although he was not a sailor in the traditional sense, like Ferdinand Magellan or Vasco da Gama, men who captured their own expeditions and dealt directly with the perils of sea command. Vespucci did, in fact, participate in maritime voyages. Historical documents confirm that he sailed on several exploratory missions along the coast of South America, where he played a role as a navigator and chronicler. These expeditions occurred between approximately 1497 and 1504, depending on which of his letters one's consider authentic. However, Vespucci never led a voyage as the solo captain. This brings up the question of why he needed someone like Alonso de Ojeda to serve as the captain on one of the expeditions he joined. The answer lies in the structure of early European voyages of discovery, which typically involved collaboration between professional navigators, military commanders, financiers, and political sponsors. Vespucci, while skilled in navigation and astronomy, was not a military leader nor had the maritime experience to command fleets. Figures like Ojeda had the requisite authority and naval command experience, allowing Vespucci to participate in voyages under their leadership while contributing his skills in mapping, documenting, and astronomical observation. One common critique leveled at Vespucci is that despite his fame, there are no surviving maps directly attributed to him. This is a fair and historically accurate observation. Vespucci did not produce any maps himself, nor is there definitive evidence of charts bearing his name or bearing his hand. Unlike explorers such as Columbus or Magellan, whose navigational paths were often recorded with the aid of royal cartographers or ship logs, Vespucci's legacy rests almost entirely on the letters he either wrote or had published in his name. These letters, particularly Mundus Novus and the Lettera to Sedorini, were widely circulated in Europe. and significantly influenced the geographic understanding of the New World. They represented compelling arguments for the existence of a new continent distinct from Asia. It is precisely this influence that shaped Martin Waldseemüller's famous 1507 world map. Waldseemüller, a German cartographer, never traveled to the New World himself. He worked from secondary sources, including published accounts and letters from explorers. Among these, Vespucci's letters stood out for their vivid detail, scope, and daring assertions. In Mundus Novus, Vespucci wrote, "It is lawful to call it a new world, because none of these countries were known to our ancestors. I have found a continent in that southern part full of animals and more populous than are Europe or Asia or Africa, and even more temperate and pleasant than any other region known to us." This statement was a bold departure from the prevailing assumption that the lands discovered by Columbus and others were parts of Asia. Instead, Vespucci suggested that he had encountered an entirely separate continent. This conceptual leap, rather than any technical contribution to cartography, is what left a lasting imprint. Waldseemüller found Vespucci's writings so compelling that he named the new continent America in his honor. The name appeared on his 1507 map, which was the first map in history to depict the Western Hemisphere as a distinct continent, and to call it America. It is important to note that Waldseemüller's decision was based not on precise geographical data, but on the persuasive power of Vespucci's argument that the New World was not part of Asia. This reliance on narrative rather than measurement illustrates the early stages of European cartography in the New World era. Vespucci's letters were conceptual blueprints rather than technical diagrams, filled with observations that were qualitative and descriptive more than numeric or charted. One of the key criticisms of Vespucci's writings is that while he offered descriptions of the landscape, climate, and indigenous people, he rarely provided the kind of concrete geographical data that could be used to map coastlines accurately. For instance, his comment, "The soil is very pleasant and fruitful, full of immense woods and forests, and it is always green, for the foliage never drops off," provides a general sense of lush vegetation and favorable climate, but tells us nothing about longitude, latitude, or the shape of the coast. Nevertheless, this kind of description played a role in forming European perceptions of the New World as a bountiful and untamed land, ripe for exploration and colonization. In his Lettera to Soderini, Vespucci did include some estimations that gave a vague sense of scale and direction. One such quote is, "We sailed continuously for more than 700 leagues along the coast. Between the south and west, we found ourselves in a climate where the length of the night exceeded 15 hours. This kind of observation implies travel to high southern latitudes, perhaps as far as modern-day Patagonia. He has also claimed to have he also claimed that his expedition was so far south that we were outside the Tropic of Capricorn, where the South Pole rises above the horizon 32 degrees. Though precise, such statements help European readers understand that the explored territory extended well below the equator, suggesting that the landmass was massive and possibly continental in scale. Now right here is where I want to stop. Before I actually read past this and I wanted to just move on with it, but then after I did the first episode I stopped and I wanted to bring this up. People during that time period wouldn't have had any kind of clue about the South Pole. This statement to me seems a little bit suspicious all on its own. Like nobody would have even had any kind of concept of what the South Pole was, much less any kind of discussion. Now, for me, according to my understanding, before all of these voyages with like Columbus and Magellan, everybody had this idea that the world was flat. And here in a little bit, you'll hear a little bit of them trying to justify the reason for why he would have mentioned the South Pole. Now, if he would have actually mentioned the South Pole, that would go according to some of my earlier beliefs in this topic, which I believe that there were people during that time period and even before, not everybody, but there were people who believed that the world was round.